this saying struck me when I knew what the previous two speakers were going to be talking about. This came into my mind as a way of really tackling where we're at, to the questions that just came up, where we're at, what businesses are going to adopt solutions like the one we just heard. For example, small businesses, startup businesses who just don't have the data to train an SLM at this point are going to have to stick with large language models. But if you are a global legacy business in a highly regulated industry like financial services, insurance, banking, you've got a lot, and you can do that pairing really well. You know exactly what it is you're looking for in the answer and the prompt. So that's where that's going to happen, and it is happening. This saying has a very deep history, actually way back to an ancient Greek poet. But I learned in chatting to someone outside, apparently it's very current in New Zealand, which I was quite surprised about. So it came back into vogue through really a bit of literary criticism from this chap. Probably no one in here is an English literature grad, so we'd never heard of Isaiah Berlin, but he was looking at, oh yes, so we got one here, great, so you know where we're coming from. He was looking at different authors and the way they perceive the world and how that influenced their writing. And he really drew from that this idea that the hedgehog view is you can bring together, the entire perspective of that author as a unified view of the world. This is what theoretical physicists are pursuing, after all. By contrast, foxes, they have a lot of things that they are focused on, and they don't seek that unity. They're not worried about trying to unify it. And so, we all love a bit of classification and categorization. So there is a sense in which perhaps all of us fit one or other of these. But when it comes to AI, there's a very specific reason why I think it's just useful to understand these two perspectives and think about how they work together. So that's what I'm going to try to unpack for you, because the organizations that I engage with who are brand side, like those global legacy regulated industries, they are trying to do both of these things at the same time, and it's a bit of a challenge to figure out how that's going to work. So just to have an understanding of the hedgehog view, it's big, right? No one is talking a small game when it comes to AI. You can see this from a quote here from McKinsey. And they were very much, them and others, this isn't an endorsement or a criticism. I know we had some bashing earlier on, but this is why we have a lot of hype around AI, Gen AI, agentic AI, because of this belief that this is a huge opportunity. It's going to be incredibly transformative. It will be able to pretty much run everything if only we give it an opportunity. So if we start to look upwards to organizations like the World Economic Forum, so if any of you are conspiracy theorists and you worry about what happens at Davos every year when world leaders and large corporate leaders jet out to Switzerland and decide what's going to happen for all of us in the future. So they have a very, very strong view, strong hedgehog view that this thing is big. This is no small beer, right? This is a major transformation of pretty much everything, not just organizations, but economies, not just economies, but societies. And when you start to see it through that lens, you realize, just how significant, why these huge bets, on the day when Nvidia reached a $5 trillion valuation, why are the markets betting so hugely on this? And within the report that I'm referencing here from WEF, just circle that bit in the middle, ignites an AI-powered industrial revolution. So this is utter transformation. Everything changes. Everything, hopefully, because they mentioned in that quote before, to the benefit of everyone. We will wait and see if that is actually the case. But this is the hedgehog view. It is big. It is bigger than you can imagine. It's going to disrupt everything, if that's how you perceive it. So we annually produce this list of the Hedgehog View 100 most influential people in data and AI. And for the North American version, we asked them to share some of their use cases with us, and then we categorized them. And to the point I was just making about transformation, within business, the expectation is that it's going to be transformational. So not just tinkering with operations. Yes, that's part of it. Yes, that is, going to move things forward a little bit. But the ultimate goal is to do big things, to apply AI, Gen AI, agentic AI, to really get the business to operate in the way that its founders, its shareholders, its employees always hoped that it could actually operate in, with that speed, that efficiency, that agility that keeps you engaged, buying, working there every single day. And then again, when we asked our European CDOs, Chief Data Officers in the Hedgehog View 100, what's their core focus? You can see right at the top, transformation, right? Not talking the smaller things, you can see the more specific things run out at much lower scores. But also importantly, they're not just doing it for its own sake. It's not data and AI for its own sake. It's about the business strategy. And if the business strategy is we're being disrupted or we're going to be the disruptors, things have to change, that's a big play. That is a really big hedgehog perspective on what's coming up. So these are the upsides. Potentially, this transforms things in a way that is durable, has a big impact, gets lots of benefits for all concerned, whether that's internally, for employees, for stakeholders, for the supply chain, or externally, for customers, and so forth. Aim big, win big. And that's why the markets currently are convinced that this is where they should be placing their money. And it's transformative, it's not just operational. But of course, when you swing for the fences, there are risks. This doesn't happen quickly. No matter what our friends in the developer space tell us, in brand side, legacy businesses, or even in startups, you can't always do things as quickly as you'd like to. You can't move as fast as you'd like to. There are many reasons why. There are lots of interdependencies and therefore potential for failure, for one of those failures to disrupt the whole program. And after all, the success rate of transformations, business transformations, is very poor. How many of you have been involved in an IT transformation that's died on its arse? Right? Most of you have had that experience. It will happen again with AI. And there could be unintended consequences. We don't really know what some of those risks might be if we go not just agentic, but autonomous. We don't really know what happens. And so one of the reasons for slowing things down is just to try to get some line of sight on what if it goes wrong, what then? What have we done to our business? What have we done to the trust that we've built up? So that's the hedgehog view. Let's think about this from the fox point of view. And we've just been hearing about small language models, and they're very much one of those many small things that I suspect many of you in this room are really engaged with and working on and trying to think about, can I tune my own SLM that's going to be domain specific, that's going to be transformative for a process? Can I start to build some agents to take away a lot of that grunt work that nobody in the business really wants to do? We're stuck with it. We seem to introduce productivity tools, and what we end up doing is doing the work that the productivity tool asks us to do rather than the stuff we really want to get going with. Those are really important small things to focus on. And you can see that when the big $5 trillion business starts to say, do you know what? SLMs, they're looking a bit more like the future, then we should start to listen. The small view coming very strongly into focus. And yes, because they're not trying to do everything, we can reduce that risk of the hallucinations. That grounding piece that we were just hearing about in the previous presentations, the use of RAG, the human in the loop, all those things you know about, right? I'm not going to tell you how to do those, but that all helps to improve the trust in the model outputs, and therefore the adoption, the rollout, even getting from experimentation into production quicker, because instead of trying to get this massive engine to understand a business of a certain size, it's the data from within the business that is now servicing the business, but just using the performance and power that's coming into that business from the outside. And we heard, and it was a great note that we heard Andy, I think, stressed a lot. We like trees and water, sustainability, frugal AI. These really, really matter. As does responsible AI, making sure we're thinking about those consequences, intended or otherwise. So the upsides. It might be that in developing an agent to do something in your organization, you suddenly realize, that is such a bad process, right? We have engineered a concrete parachute. The process is perfect, but it doesn't save lives. Let's change that. Let's not just automate a thing we've been struggling with and working around all these years. Let's do something different. And in that second bullet point, some of you might have heard, firstly, there was it's back to the natural history thing, there was an article in a research paper in Nature saying that we're probably close to peak data in terms of training LLMs, in terms of what is publicly accessible, pirated as well. And now Goldman Sachs is saying, do you know what? It's the data that you have in your organizations that is the real gold dust. And when Goldman Sachs start talking like that, you want to get worried on the one hand because they're going to want to exploit it. But on the other hand, it's a truth that is your competitive advantage. Only you know those things about your business, about your customers, about your market, about your supply chain. And if you can bring those into an SLM, an agent, they are going to work for you incredibly powerfully, more so than trying to get an LLM to understand what the hell it is that you do and why you do it that way. And of course, looking smaller, lower risk of failure because these are more single point things, single point solutions. I know that in IT wasn't popular so long ago, but maybe we're going to look back and go, yeah, and we can move it at pace. But of course, the downsides, proof of concepts, not very popular this year. Thank you, MIT, who had shares in a variety of companies that went down significantly on the day they released that report. It did hit the market. It was quite remarkable. There was like 4 or 5% hit on the likes of NVIDIA and Microsoft, etc., when they said proofs of concepts are failing. So that's one of the challenges of having the small focus, that you build something, you put a lot of resource behind it, or a certain amount of resource behind it, and it just, so what, right? It just doesn't do anything of any great import. Also, maybe it does work, but does it really scale up to that transformation piece? Does it move the dial in a really big way for the business? Or if you chain these things together or stack them in some way. And you can see that research from Evident. There's a lot of attention on internal support, chatbots, supporting HR queries, supporting agents, all that kind of stuff. And this is from the banking sector. It's all going towards internal users and very limited impact for customers, which is where you might expect, once you get past those efficiency gains, that you could get those incremental revenue improvements. But it's not happening so much. So you're not getting that opportunity to really look upwards and push upwards and push towards a hedgehog outcome. So is there a way that we could actually jointly hold both of those views simultaneously within ourselves, within our organizations, within our functions, and try to get the best out of the two sides? So how many foxes does it take to make a hedgehog? Again, this is not an endorsement, but this is from McKinsey looking at the claims process in an insurance business. And you can see, sorry that the type isn't that great, but you can find this quite readily. It's in a McKinsey article that's freely available online. They've stacked 12 different fox-like uses of AI, agentic, analytical, rules-based systems. And they're stacking them up to transform how an insurance company might take in claims, process them, review and pay. Now, of course, there's no orchestration layer there. There's no attention to the data foundations, which again, quite rightly, we were hearing can be part of the challenge in getting there. But it does show you that that's beginning to look like a hedgehog made out of 12 foxes. And I think that's how we need to start thinking about this. Very simply, start thinking, yes, there are quick wins. And the quick wins don't necessarily need a huge amount of resource. But some of the more challenging things, we have still got to go through proof of concept, because eventually they do become, hopefully, strategic. You will not land a strategic hedgehog, ambitious project without some kind of proof, right? Maybe the quick wins can scale upwards. Often it's the more challenging things that go, we can change and we can become that business we always hoped we were. So things that we have to start thinking about doing to get there, you need that focus on, does this have a strategic outcome? Or are we just tinkering with something that's relatively small scale, is going to give us some efficiencies? And these are the things, in the C-suite, you go in and you say, we're going to reduce risk. We're going to be more compliant. We won't get fined. We can reduce costs. This aligns to the big picture view that the business has of what it wants to be in the next 2, 3, 5, even 10 years. Even a small scale project should be thinking about that. If someone is coming to you as a stakeholder and saying, build me something, and you say, so how does that align to the business plan? How does that align to the business strategy? And they go, oh no, it's just going to make my bit easier. Show them the door and tell them to come back when they've thought about it. Now, of course, you will have to do some of those things that are just for a group of stakeholders, a specific division or function. You're going to have some innovation that will fail, and accept that. And it's about having a portfolio of those things that are going on. So a few weeks ago, I heard someone from Dell presenting about the start of this year. They said they'd open call, give us all your AI use cases that you'd like to progress. And they've received 800, and they picked 4. And the 4 that they picked were ones where they could go, yeah, that if we do that, we are the business of the future. We are sustainable, we can continue to grow, we can maintain our market position as a result. But of course, within that, there will be components, there will be Fox-focused elements that are being stacked up to deliver those really large ones. But if you think about that, the waste of effort, where 796 use cases get ignored, and only 4 get progressed, what was going wrong in the thinking? It was not focused on the big picture. So just things to bear in mind, try to have those quarterly cycles if you're engaging with stakeholders or the business in some way. Most businesses have quarterlies, things where they go, right, this is the funding that's happening now, this is the ambition for this quarter. Some, of course, are moving even quicker. You might be working agile and you're going to get into 2-week sprints, etc. And that's really going to stress you out. But maybe you can combine those rates of activity and make sure that the functions who want some of this stuff, they understand who they've got to go through. They understand what it is you're asking for, and I'm just going to come on to that in a moment. These are the challenges you will experience. So I said about stakeholders saying, I want this because it'll make my life better. That's always going to happen. And sometimes you just have to say yes, whether you're a developer of AI, whether you're working in data space. If you work in sales, you work in marketing, that still happens. You get people to say, I want this for me. You only have so many resources, so you've got to figure out where you're going to deploy them and at what pace. And those enterprise gains will not necessarily be obvious to the stakeholders asking you for a Fox level thing. Maybe they just can't see it. Maybe they just don't have visibility on it. And likewise, they can get upset. They can go, you just said no, right? How dare you? I've come to you and asked for this. Why won't you make it happen? So this is how you start to resolve some of that. So you need to be very, very clear. If you are developers, and I'm making some assumptions, but developers, consultants, whatever, be clear how it is you decide what progresses. What is it that you will do in this quarter, in this cycle? Talk about the KPIs and try to ladder those up and go, okay, so if we're going to help you on this metric, does that ladder up to a corporate goal? And we can show progress towards it. This one usually gets missed out because we run out of time and we're on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. But trying to close that loop and trying to understand, did it do what you hoped for? Did we get that benefit off the back of it? And if we didn't, how do we make sure that doesn't happen next time? And also, who's going to fund this, right? Some of this stuff is expensive. Question here about what it might cost. Who's asking for that to be built? Who's willing to fund it as a foundational model? Usually, you're going to have to get multiple functions on board to sustain the cost of some of those early foundational activities. And then just finally, in the hope that the Hedgehog View could be realized and what the World Economic Forum believes is ahead for all of us, is running into this challenge around skills. So S&A Academy, they're one of the apprenticeship providers in the UK, and they're seeing this writ large. There is so much demand for the talent, probably all of you in this room and Linux recruits, who are in the hotspot of trying to find these people to place into organizations who want to get this stuff done. And it's hard because these are new skills. There is not a lot of legacy around a lot of this stuff. And so trying to stay on top of the skills that matter for yourselves, for your organizations, is a challenge. You need to work with good partners who can help support you with that. And then for all of us, I think we all face into this all the time. So the box on the right is a fascinating statistic. So if you ask HR, are you training your staff on how they should and can use AI? And they go, yes. They'll all go pretty much, yes, we are. When you ask the staff, they go, what training? And that's a problem. That is a real problem when this stuff starts to land. And then, of course, the top-down issue, that the hedgehogs at the top are setting out the big picture, the strategy, the things they want to achieve, and they don't understand this, and they don't have, the insight, the skills, or perhaps the ability to adapt. And in the famous saying, Darwin, it's those most capable of adapting that will survive. And that's true of us as individuals, as a species. It's true of us as employees. It's true of businesses. And if it happens at the pace that is being predicted, there will be survivors and there will be dodos. So don't be a dodo. Okay, that's me. Anyone who wants to follow up afterwards, I'm always interested in talking about this stuff. Very happy to engage with you by email or indeed live in the room right now.